Hey guys, it's Lauren Lando here from ESS. In another segment here on our roundtable discussions today, we're very fortunate to have Tyler Christiansen from the NSCA, the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Tyler is the TSAC program facilitator. He has an extensive background in strength and conditioning, everywhere from minor league baseball, the collegiate sector, to special forces, to now being in charge of the TSAC program with the NSCA. It's an absolute honor to have him here, and I know he's going to share a world of information for you viewers who maybe are looking at different aspects of the field. I know when I came out of school, I could either do cardiac rehab or personal training. Now there's so many options, and Tyler's really I think he'll give us a good insight to what to expect from a few of those options. So Tyler, thank you very much. In the introduction I said all the different things you've done. Can you kind of go down chronologically what you've done?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me here. After I graduated from Iowa State University, I had worked in the Olympic sport program there. And then I had an opportunity to continue and go to Illinois State. So I worked in the collegiate sector for a little bit. After I finished that, I had an opportunity to go to Baghdad, Iraq, and train soldiers over there. Coming from the collegiate setting, it made sense to train an athlete just as if, excuse me, a tactical soldier, just as they were an athlete. It just made sense to me, so that's what I did. So I did that for a year, worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it was pretty brutal time over there, but really learned a lot. It was great. Came back from that opportunity and proceeded to work for the Colorado Rockies in 2007. That was quite the experience of learning how to manage athletes, especially with an extended season like that, 180 some games. You really start to learn that it's not all about just cracking the whip, that it's starting to just manage things. After that, I finished up the season and got an opportunity to go to the NSCA, and I was in the internship program there. Completed that internship and then went directly to the Army Physical Fitness Research Institute at the Command and General Staff College. Wow. And essentially just did a research protocol there, and just started learning more about kind of what's going on in the dynamics of leadership in the military. We did that for a year. And then I proceeded to go to, went back to the NSCA actually, as the coordinator of the TSAC program. Worked there with Rob Rogers, learned a lot about the corrective side of the house from him, and he was a great instructor on that. And then after approximately a year and a half there, I had an opportunity to, let me back up. While I was at the NSCA, we had a contract with 10th Group Special Forces. And we would work with just a large group of those operators down at our facility. And then we also had some firefighters, and then also our SWAT team down in Colorado Springs. So constantly training with that, and then going around teaching the TSAC facilitator course. After I finished that up, I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and work for a special mission unit out there. And just really didn't know much about it. It was kind of just a leap of faith. And so I jumped into that, and I loved everything about working with that environment, except I found out that I wasn't quite a DC big city type of guy. So after I finished up that job there, I went down to 7th Group Special Forces and took up their education program. So I was in charge of mostly setting up an education program for them. And that's kind of where the light bulb went off for me, that with these tactical athletes, we have to educate them. And that, you know, you got them for 6 months, they're gone for 6 months, so you got to do the right thing and actually educate them, not just tell them what to do, but also why. Unfortunately, there was a layoff from the government, and a bunch of coaches got laid off in this time frame. And at that point, I was fortunate enough to end up back at the NSCA managing the TSAC program.
Awesome. Well, you've had a ton of experience, and what I'd like to do is maybe kind of go back through that experience and talk about, obviously there were different times in your career where you had the experience. I'm sure you went into Iowa State and Illinois State pretty green, but yet also with that bravado of a young coach coming out of school going, I know it all, I know it all. And then all of a sudden you get thrown into the mix, you're like, ooh, okay, maybe I don't know as much. Did that moment happen to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a great coach, Rourke Cutchlow.
Okay.
Worked with him at Iowa State and Illinois State, and he really focused on the basics and the fundamentals, making sure that I was coaching and that I was an active coach, and I can't thank him enough for that. And then when I was over in Iraq, and I was kind of the subject matter expert, but a young coach, that's when I got the point where, oh, I know this, I got this. And then when I came back from there, then reality set back in. And then I was like, yeah, I really need to continue learning.
Right.
And that continues today.
Well, I run into that with my interns every time they come in. You know, they've read everything from a book, and you know, they think in this perfect world, here's how it should lay out and here's how it should look. And at the end of the day, I always tell them, I said, there's a difference between, you know, theory and practical, and it's in the application side, and it's very rarely do they meet, you know, really well congruently. So that's cool to know that you had that experience, and then when you went overseas. I've got to believe that, you know, now, when we're working with athletes, and I know this because I presented at the TSAC conference for you probably 4 years ago, and I didn't really understand really the role until I got there, and I started to listen to what people did, and I started to really pay attention. I was like, okay, I'm not trying to get somebody faster or quicker to run a 40 or a shuttle or be better on the field. This is about survival. And tell me about that a little bit when you were over there in Iraq. Like, your training is now different. You have to put enough workload on these guys, but not so much that you're creating fatigue and exhausted aspects so they can't perform their duties, correct? Correct.
Like working in the special operations community, I found that they're very much like the sport athletes of wrestlers or MMA guys, in the aspect of they will beat themselves into the ground repeatedly to try to get better. And with the tactical side, it's the same thing, and my job is to more pull back on the reins and slow them down and make them actually start to get quality over quantity. And that's one of the big things that really hit home for me, is the aspect of, you know, anybody can put, you know, the Mel Sif quote, anybody, you know, can beat down the hardiest of Marines, but it's the, I'm gonna mess up this quote.
No, that's all right.
Yeah. Anyways, anybody can beat down a soldier. Like anybody can put a program together to leave you in a puddle of sweat laying on the floor thinking that you're going to vomit. It's the methodical way of putting that together to get the gains that you don't have to end up in that state.
Right. Field versus real.
Right. Exactly.
You know, I had a good workout today, or I felt like I had a good workout today, versus am I going to be quicker? Is my impulse going to be greater? All those different things that we look at from a performance variable, are they there? Did we train them? And did we train them with optimal rest?
Right.
So when you're over there, did you have to break? You know, I think, you know, when I think of military training, you know, I think of the long duration running and things like that, the cadence runs, everything like that. Is that still pretty popular, or is that something that is popular but now they're a little bit more interval based, or they're using a little more strength and conditioning?
The long distance running, you know, if you're good at long distance, you're going to do long distance. If you're good at the bodybuilding type workouts, you're going to do that. And it's the culture of the military. Okay. You do your push-ups, sit-ups, and you run. And that's the culture. And essentially our job is to change that culture. So, you know, it starts, you know, with just trying to help them get better at what they're doing. And as soon as you have that trust, then they allow you to build from that. And then they allow you control of your program, and then they start to see the benefits of stepping outside of what they're comfortable with, whether it's that long distance running, and that's when the culture starts to change. And it's just not going in and saying this is the way it needs to be. You got to educate them to understand the need for change. And once they get that, then you just break it down so it's simple for them, and then you can move into you know, make sure they have successful attempts at it, and then once they see it in the real world environment, now you have that education cycle going.
Did you feel as a young coach going over there that it was maybe initially hard for the buy-in component? Obviously you had the military background, which probably helps with the buy-in.
Right.
But being a younger coach, was it tough?
Not so much. When I went over there wasn't anything set up. Okay. It was essentially the job description that I read set it up that I was going to be over there training.
Okay.
And then when I arrived, the real world application was I'm handing them towels as they step into the gym. So I was kind of upset about that, and I didn't want to spend the next year of my life in Iraq handing out towels and managing a facility that I actually wanted to be training. So, you know, as soon as that opportunity opened up for them, because it wasn't there before, all of a sudden it was like the velvet rope was set up and people were waiting outside to get in because it was a unique service.
Yeah. Yeah, something that they desperately needed, but maybe didn't know that they wanted it.
Right.
And so now you provided, okay, here's what I can do. I have a skill set. Let me give this to you.
Right.
Now going back to the managing the fatigue aspect, would you know if they had duties that they had to perform, or if they had missions you knew in advance so you could modify?
Most of the time that communication was there. If they knew that they had a night mission going up, then it was a recovery session and we'd get it the next morning when they're recovered.
Okay.
But the mission always comes first.
Yep.
The last thing you want to do is beat somebody into the ground or do heavy squats or very methodical program without thinking about the mission.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's funny. You know, this past weekend we just had the MMA and combative tactical weekend at the NSCA, and I would say across the board, every presenter said, if your strength and conditioning gets in the way of the skill preparation, you screwed up.
Right.
You screwed up. You got in the way, and we have to understand where we sit in our job for all these industry, all these olive branches of our industry, is we're here to be the icing on the cake to the skills they possess.
Yeah.
And I think too many times we run into strength and conditioning coaches, I'm going to show you I can beat you down, and they do it. And you know, in cases like this, I mean, it could be life or death.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so you came back to the States, and then you got involved with baseball.
Baseball, yeah.
Okay, so talk to us. We had Gene Coleman on here, which was really cool because he gave us great perspective. Give us your perspective. Did you have to dial some things back when you came back?
I thought I was coming in and I was going to have full control over this program and that I could just plan out the full year, and then probably 30 games in, reality set in that it's more about just making sure they get the work they need in and making sure that they're keeping on top of it. And, you know, just like with, if I look back at my whole coaching career, I think I did them a disservice knowing what I know now. But, you know, I did the best I could at the time. And, you know, like, when I think about that time, I was like, well, I should have done this. I should have done this. I didn't think about this. But I was also, you know, that young strength coach that was just realizing what I don't know.
Yeah, you know.
So, you know, it is more managing for me on the aspect of, okay, we got a schedule set up. I didn't know it at the time, but I was kind of working off residuals in the aspect of when does detraining take place? Let's try to get a strength day in every once a week or whatever it may be.
Right, try to just maintain those qualities
Right.
through a long season, like you said. How many games?
180-ish, somewhere
It's
in there.
crazy. That's so
Yeah.
many games, and to try to manage that, heck, you just want to be able to get them on the field.
And then you have travel days, and in the AA system, you're typically riding a bus, and you know, getting the Yonda's upper lower cross back, lengthen and strengthen aspect, battling that repeatedly.
Oh yeah, I'm sure all your work is spent, you know, I'm sure for the most part, pre-game, post-game is on corrective type exercises and just putting them in a position where their muscles can do the job that they were designed to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go now from the baseball side. Let's take it to the special ops group. Okay, can you talk to us a little bit, obviously, about maybe nothing too specific, because you can't, but freaky feats of ability?
You always have the outlier in that group, especially in the special operations. You can say, you don't want to do this, you can't beat up your body every day, you can't do this, you know, it's detrimental to, then you have that one guy, everybody, well, what about him? And, you know, and you always just got to explain, he's the exception to the rule, you know, and eventually it'll catch up with him, but at the moment he does well, he looks great, he moves great, he crushes everybody and everything, but he's a physical specimen. So it's making the other people realize that, you know, the aspect of this may be his training program and he may be able to do this on a regular basis, day in and day out, but that doesn't work for everybody else.
Right.
And that was a big big battle, I guess.
Well, I've talked to other practitioners who have been involved with those special ops groups, and they kind of tell me this thing. There's this work ability that these guys have, and they just go to this place. Like the eyes just kind of gloss over it, and they just work.
Yep.
Anything, just crazy, distance run, crazy amount of pull-ups, something that you just saw at one time where you're just like, this defies everything I know.
I had one guy that was working on powerlifting. That was his main emphasis in the gym, and then he just got a wild hair and said he's going to do a marathon. Didn't train up for it, didn't do anything, just went and ran. And he ended up doing it and did rather well.
Wow.
His feet were beat up, he had blisters galore, he couldn't really walk for the next couple days because of the blisters, but other than that he was fine. And then, and then he jumped back straight into powerlifting, and then, those type of things. They've got a great work ethic, and they're very good at doing, I don't want to say the middle of the road, they can maintain a high moderate work capacity for an extended period of time.
Cool.
It's pretty cool to see. And again, you just gotta, because they're good at that, you gotta pull back the rein and make them strong, and especially in the strength aspect, and be able to move properly.
Right. Well, that's just it. Because if you're doing all this workload that they can do, that they've got the capacity to do, but you're doing it with poor mechanics, it's just a matter of time with the alignment being out before you have a problem with the vehicle. So, so now why don't you tell us a little bit about your role with the NSCA specifically? What is your role? What are your responsibilities?
Right now, I've been in this position for roughly 7 months, and I think my first 7 months of being at the NSCA is I'm developing an education curriculum for the tactical side. We're going to break it down into 3 levels. Level 1 is almost complete. This goes in from the moment you walk in a facility to recovery, warm up, all the way through to recovery, to include correctives, basic movement patterns, power, speed, and just teaching the basics of strength and conditioning. So once that's complete, then we're going to move on to level 2, where we start to get into mental toughness, periodization models. So level 1 is how do I make a program, and then level 2 is here's how I piece these programs together. Let's see, what else do we have in there? So we got mental toughness, nutrition, periodization, and then we start to mix in a little bit more research. So if we look at the baseline back to level 1, that's all hands-on. The main intent is hands-on and getting reps in and teaching, the little things of why we do these movement patterns in these specific ways. And then, so then level 2 is 50-50, a little bit of hands-on and a little bit more science.
Okay.
And then we get to level 3, that's the latest and greatest research that's out there. We're going to start to bring that in and then teach that, and then the practical applications of that and how it had an impact on each of the different subgroups, meaning military, police, fire.
Awesome.
So that's what I've been doing for the last 7 months, and then training our SWAT team down there as well. Yeah, I'm ready to start to teach more and then get coaching more.
Yeah, it sounds like you really kind of fell in love with that teaching piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's always fun to work with the athletes, but I get that, to me, there's this you feel this like you're finally giving back. Right, where all these years we've been taking in this industry, and now we can give back. And I find with myself, anytime I educate, I learn so much more. Based on the questions in the room, based on a perspective that somebody may have when they look at your material, right? So that's cool to see it kind of come full circle, where as a student now as to an educator. So
yeah, and that's one of the big things that over the years, my transition as a coach is I see my job more as an educator, a teacher, and not just the person pointing, go do this, but to give them more information, not to overload them, but just give them the quick fixes of why. If we're squatting and you're going valgus, just don't tell them to push their knee out. Say, hey, we got to push this out because of X, Y, and Z, and create the need for that cue to take place.
Well, I always say too, hold yourself to a higher standard of education, and we can easily say, push those knees out, but is that actually correcting the default if you don't understand the underlying mechanism that's making that happen? So that's cool. I can't wait to see some of that. Obviously, you get a lot of interns at the NSCA. What are some of the things you see that maybe the education system is doing really good in preparing them for the internship, and then some things where you're like, gosh, I wish they would touch on some of this more?
we've had 2 groups of interns since I've been there, and you know, I think they come in eager to learn and ready to do the right thing, and I think they have something set in their mind of how it's supposed to be. And then all of a sudden, you know, the reality kicks in again, and it's like, oh, well, what I learned here doesn't always apply here.
Right.
And I think, you know, I think it's good to teach in absolute manners, but also let them know the left and right parameters of that standard.
Right. You can't be too rigid.
Right. You always got to be able to, the military has a term called terrain dictates, meaning you may have the perfect plan on the map, but essentially you get going on that trail and then realize that the terrain is not going to allow this movement to take place, so you got to adjust with it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. I like that a lot. That's awesome. So a question that I'm starting to ask people that come onto this roundtable, books. Books that you know, a viewer's watching this, and a book that you can sit there and say, whether it's from you know, a scientific book like maybe a super training, something like that, or you know, something that's a little bit lighter read, more perspective read, anything that you've come across of lately that you'd like to share with everybody?
Yeah, there's a book by Bruce Seidel. It's a psychology book. It's what is it? Sharpening the Warrior Mindset. Cool. And it goes into the processes of learning and what happens in the neurological system as stress is induced, as you get into those situations where you know, it's where the outlying area is life or death situation. What happens? How do we fall back on movement patterns that when we're in those situations, you usually don't excel, you raise to the level of training. And it starts to get into kind of the aspects of that, what happens when the heart rate goes up. But it's been the book I'm reading right now, and it talks about the process of learning and how we can instill learning processes a little bit better. But that'd be my main read right now.
Okay, one more time. Bruce Seidel?
Bruce Seidel, Sharpening the Warrior's Edge.
Sharpening the Warrior's Edge. Awesome. Yeah. Well, Tyler, thank you very much for the information that you gave our viewers and that you gave me, and you know, keep doing great things with the NSCA, and I always appreciate having you here and you know, learning from you and listening to you. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it.